Okay, let's unpack this. We are digging into a case today that, well, it really just shatters any sense of safety we might still cling to about our lives online. For most of us, going online, chatting, sharing things, even using encrypted apps, it feels kind of separate, doesn't it? Like there's a screen, there's distance, maybe even anonymity, a sort of psychological buffer between the digital and the real.
Yeah, and that's exactly what makes the Nth Room case from South Korea so profoundly disturbing. It didn't just blur that line, it completely obliterated it. It showed, in probably the most horrific way possible, that what happens online has brutal, real-world consequences, and that online harm is absolutely real, traceable, and devastating. We're talking about a huge digital crime operation here. Thousands of girls, women, targeted, tortured, filmed.
And the sheer number of people involved on the other side, it's just mind-boggling. These videos, this content, shared with and paid for by over 250,000 watchers, 250,000 people actively participating, consuming this organized digital torture.
And the really chilling part, this wasn't happening in some hidden corner of the dark web, the places you expect this stuff. That was the initial shock for investigators. This level of extreme, organized crime. It was operating on a platform used by literally hundreds of millions of people worldwide.
Right. We're talking about Telegram. I mean, the sixth most downloaded app globally? Something people use every day for secure messaging, all over the world. When the Korean police first started piecing it together, realizing that dark web level activity torture, child sexual abuse material was thriving on Telegram, they apparently couldn't believe it at first.
Disbelief is probably an understatement. It looked like sophisticated black market stuff. But happening right there, under the cover of everyday encrypted communication, it really throws a harsh light on how we think about app security, doesn't it? How those very privacy features could be twisted.
So the police had a massive challenge, technologically, psychologically. They ended up going deep undercover, didn't they, into these chat rooms?
They had to. It was an intense, multi-agency operation, infiltrating these digital torture chambers, basically, trying to map the network, figure out exactly how the coercion worked, who was behind it, and ultimately trying to bring the whole thing down.
So that's our mission today. We're going to dissect how they did it, the methods they used to trap victims. We'll look at the psychology of the main creators, apparently quite different motivations there. And we really need to grapple with the fallout, especially the role of those 250,000 watchers. We've got the sources, the details. Let's get into how this digital nightmare was constructed. Looking at how this whole thing operated, it's clear this wasn't just random. It wasn't opportunistic. This was a system, a carefully built trap designed for total control. Let's start right at the beginning. How did they even find and approach the victims?
They were smart. In a predatory way. They knew who to target. Mostly young women, minors, schoolgirls, college students. Also, some working women looking for extra cash. People potentially vulnerable economically or socially. And the approach, it looked completely normal, totally legitimate. Fake job offers were common. Modeling gigs, part-time work, stuff advertised online on social media, job boards.
Okay, so that first contact builds a little trust, maybe, lowers their guard because it looks like a real opportunity.
Exactly. Establish that communication line first. But then, almost immediately, it shifts from a job chat to asking for personal details, maybe a digital audition. And they weren't after just a bit of money. They were hunting for leverage, personal data.
Which leads straight into the hacking and the blackmail. How did they get that access so fast? It sounds like they were incredibly effective.
They used a mix of techniques, social engineering for sure, but also phishing. They'd send malicious links disguised as application forms or contracts. Victim clicks, boom, access gained. Often targeting accounts like Instagram because people store so much personal stuff there. The goal was quick, total extraction. Private chats, intimate photos, embarrassing videos, basically anything that could ruin someone's life if it got out.
Wow. So in an instant, it goes from maybe I'll get this job to this person holds my entire life in their hands. The power dynamic just flips completely.
Completely. And that stolen data, that's the weapon. The blackmail wasn't vague. It was specific, relentless. We have these chats with your boyfriend, we'll send them to your parents, or we'll leak these photos to your university, or your boss will see this. Instant destruction of reputation, relationships, for young victims especially. The fear of social ruin, family disapproval, it's overwhelming. They feel utterly trapped. Compliance seems like the only option.
And that's when the demands escalate beyond just threats. This is where the forced acts come in, right? Creating the actual content for those paying viewers.
Yes. This is the core horror of the Nth Room. Under that constant threat of total exposure, victims were forced into these degrading acts of self-harm. It served two purposes, really. One, it proved the victim was completely submissive to the admin. Two, it created the exclusive, gruesome content that people were paying crypto to see, and they demanded proof. Live streams, recorded videos, no ambiguity.
And the acts themselves, the sources describe things designed not just to humiliate, but to physically violate, to break someone psychologically.
Truly horrific things.
Yeah.
Mandated self-mutilation. It was about power through causing pain. Examples, forcing victims to carve slave into their own skin with a knife, or using needles, making incisions on private parts. And then there were these humiliating tasks they had to perform in public places. All filmed, of course, to prove the admin's absolute control.
And if the threat of leaks was the constant pressure, then this slave contract thing, that sounds like the final nail in the coffin, formalizing the nightmare.
It's such an insidious element, isn't it? They made victims sign these documents, these slave contracts. Now, legally, they're meaningless, of course. But psychologically, he cemented the victim's subjugation. It was like formally handing over your entire life, your time, your body to the admin.
What kind of things were actually in these contracts? Did they spell out the terms of this slavery?
The language was meant to sound final, absolute. Clauses about obedience, about the admin owning the content, the victim's time, forever. It acted as this psychological anchor, reinforcing the trap. And the real tragedy here, it bears repeating, is that most signing these were minors, completely overwhelmed, probably not fully grasping the depth of it.
So the contract becomes the standing threat. The admin doesn't need new leverage every time. It's built in.
Exactly. The threat of the leak becomes constant background noise, a tool used daily. Do this now, prove it, or the contract's void and everything gets leaked. Just constant terror, ensuring compliance from potentially thousands of victims, all at the same time.
So when the police finally got inside this network, they found it wasn't just one big messy group. It was structured, right? Almost like different tiers of horror. We need to talk about these two main types, the doctor rooms and the Nth Rooms.
Yeah, the segmentation is really key. It shows a level of criminal organization you don't always see. It was designed for profit, but also for, well, maximizing the sadism. Let's start with the doctor rooms, run by this admin called Doctor or Box in Korean.
These were more like the business end of the operation, purely transactional.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Doctor rooms were about making money. Big money. Very expensive to get in. Tiered memberships. You paid more. You got access to supposedly worse stuff. And it was all crypto. Bitcoin mainly. Untraceable payments. Fees were high, starting around, what, $150 going up to maybe $1,200 for the top-tier access. Higher fee meant, supposedly more disturbing content. Younger victims, more extreme acts.
Okay, but the sources are clear. Even with those high prices in the doctor rooms, the real demand, the peak of this depravity, was in the Nth Rooms.
That's where it got truly dark. The Nth Rooms, run by God. These are the most popular, the most infamous. And the name Nth, it's symbolic, like endless, implying there was no limit, no bottom. The admin basically promised an unending escalation of torture and degradation.
So the Nth Room wasn't just a collection of horrible videos. It was designed to constantly push boundaries, keep the audience hooked on shock.
Exactly. It was a psychological feedback loop built to constantly outdo itself.
Yeah.
Just when viewers thought, okay, this is the absolute worst, God would drop something new, more gruesome, maybe more personal feeling than the last. That constant escalation kept demand sky high. It gave the Nth Rooms this reputation. Darker, more exclusive, more sought after than the doctor rooms, even though those cost a fortune.
And this difference between the rooms seems to reflect guys running them, right? The doctor versus God. Very different motivations driving them.
Fundamentally different. It's fascinating in a morbid way. The Dr. Cho Jubin seems to have been primarily driven by money. Everything he did, the pricing tiers, demanding crypto. It was all about maximizing profit, treating victims like commodities.
But God Moon Hyung-wook, it sounds like money wasn't the main thing for him. It was more personal, more about the power.
For Moon Hyung-wook, yeah, money seemed secondary. His drive was, well, the sources call it passion and pleasure. Pleasure derived from total absolute control. The intoxication of pain is one phrase used. That feeling of power he got from trapping people, torturing them, ruining their lives for an audience. For him, the Nth Room was like his masterpiece. A sick, twisted creation fueled by feeling like a god deciding who suffers.
It's easy to get lost in the big numbers, 250,000 watchers, thousands of victims. It can feel abstract. We need to bring it down to a human level. That story of the 16-year-old girl, it really shows how this process worked, the real trauma.
It's a vital example. Shows how quick and devastating it was. She was 16, her Instagram gets hacked. And the admin, moving fast, immediately pulls her private chats, things she thought were safe, just between her and her boyfriend.
Instant leverage, her social life, her family relationships, everything's on the line immediately.
Total exposure threat, right away. She's terrified, feels she has no choice but to comply to protect herself, so she does what the hacker demands, instantly.
And the demands immediately jump to self-harm, proving ownership of her body.
That's the horrifying pivot. Forced self-mutilation. Specifically, cutting "I am your slave" into her own body with a knife. That's the point of total breakdown, submission. But it wasn't the end, of course not. The blackmail just got worse. Next, they forced her into a group sex video. More horrific content for the viewers, more leverage over her.
And then the ultimate threat, moving from digital control to potentially real-world physical danger from the audience. That's just chilling.
It shows the absolute depth of the psychological torture. The admin told her he was planning to leak her home address to select Nth Room viewers. The implication was crystal clear. They could come to her house and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Suddenly, even her home isn't safe. It introduces this direct threat of physical violence from strangers.
The damage from just that one sequence of events, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
Catastrophic. She fell into severe depression, attempted suicide. Thankfully, she survived, but needed months of intensive therapy, medical care. The physical scars were visible, doctors noted them, but the psychological wounds, from the digital slavery, the threats, profound, enduring. And you have to multiply that trauma by thousands. That's the scale we're dealing with.
The sheer size of this operation is hard to grasp, and it sounds like the official victim count doesn't even scratch the surface. Let's try to quantify it. How many victims are we really talking about?
Officially, when arrests happened, police identified 103 specific victims, people they could confirm were coerced and filmed. And out of those 103, 26 were minors. That's nearly a quarter right there.
Yeah.
But based on just the amount of content seen, how long it ran, the size of the network, pretty much everyone agrees the actual number is in the thousands.
Thousands, and the age. That's where it just becomes unbearable.
Absolutely. 26 minors officially identified. But the youngest confirmed victim police found was about 12 years old. There were even whispers, unconfirmed reports of content involving even younger children. The idea that kids that young could be trapped like this for paying viewers is just beyond words.
And the content itself, it sounds like it went to the darkest possible places.
It lived up to that endless name of the Nth Room. Clear child pornography. And horrifyingly, reports confirmed forced acts involving animals. Just a constant escalation into new levels of depravity to keep that 250,000 audience engaged.
I want to go back to the control aspect. How did they maintain this minute-by-minute grip on potentially thousands of people? We talked about the slave contract, but how did that work day to day?
It was obsessive. 247 surveillance, really. Using that contract threat constantly.
Yeah.
Victims had to follow these super detailed daily schedules, dictated by the admins. When to wake up, specific check-in times, even what clothes to wear.
So it required constant proof, turning their phones into monitoring devices against them.
Total surveillance, yeah. Photo proof, video proof, sometimes live streams, proof of every movement, every demanded act. It basically stripped away all autonomy. Their lives became prisons controlled through Telegram. And it wasn't just digital. While it started online, admins did force real-life meetings sometimes. Documented cases show victims forced to meet perpetrators, leading to physical abuse, sexual assault, bridging that gap between digital and physical violence.
The victim statements that came out later, they paint such a vivid picture of this daily terror.
One victim described it chillingly, like being trapped in a nightmare you can't wake up from. She said every single day brought some new, worse demand. Physical, psychological torture. She talked about being forced to scratch herself viciously with her nails, or burn her own skin with a hot iron. It just highlights the pure, sustained sadism behind it all.
Which brings us squarely to the most uncomfortable part of this whole thing. The watchers, 250,000 paying subscribers. They weren't just bystanders, they were the market.
This is the huge societal issue the Nth Room exposed. Mass digital complicity. Those viewers created the demand, the massive financial incentive that fueled the whole operation. Without that paying audience, the Nth Room structure, both economic and psychological, just collapses instantly.
And were they just passively consuming?
Yeah.
Or did they, encourage?
Oh, far from passive. The psychology there was deeply disturbed, often competitive even. They treated finding or seeing new, worse content like a challenge. Viewers would actively try to find more extreme stuff to share or push the admins to create something even more shocking than what was already there. This demand from the audience itself created that upward spiral of sickness.
It's terrifying that this criminal ecosystem was basically self-perpetuating, even recruiting new criminals from its own user base.
Yeah, it was designed to breed predators. Many loyal watchers were minors themselves. There's one documented case of an 18-year-old watcher, so involved, so loyal, they promoted him to admin. And what did he do? He brought his friends in, also minors, made them admins too. The viewer base was literally a training ground for the next wave of perpetrators.
So if you pull back, the legal and moral responsibility here is immense. Okay, a few admins committed the direct acts, but 250,000 people paid, demanded, consumed this, they enabled it, they were accomplices.
That's the crux of it. The legal nightmare South Korea faced. They paid the crypto fees, they funded it. In the eyes of the victims, the public, they're absolutely culpable. They enabled years of torture against thousands. But prosecuting 250,000 people, logistically, politically, almost impossible. It forced a really uncomfortable societal reckoning with just how many people were involved.
It's still hard to believe this went on for 2 years, operating successfully, hidden in plain sight almost. That points to some serious technological defenses the admins were using. What made it so hard for police to crack initially?
The tech environment was definitely the biggest hurdle. Telegram's encryption, first off. While security experts debate the specifics of their protocol, MT-Proto, the real issue was Telegram's policy. Strict privacy, no central moderation to speak of. Admins knew this. They knew they could share the most horrific stuff, CSAM, torture videos, without worrying about authorities just asking Telegram for the data. There was no central point to ask.
So the very features designed for user privacy became the perfect shield for criminals.
Exactly. And the admin's OPSEC, their operational security, was tight for those 2 years. Multiple accounts, constantly changing them, using VPNs consistently to hide their real IP addresses, their locations. But the real killer for investigators early on was the money. All payments in crypto. Untraceable crypto. That just wiped out the usual financial trail police rely on.
And God, the Nth Room guy, he was apparently extra cautious.
His precautions were almost professional grade, yeah. When they finally caught him, he admitted he never, ever used his personal phone for any of this. Had a completely separate burner phone just for the crime ring.
And the payments too, even more layers.
Yep, didn't just take crypto. He routed funds through gift vouchers somehow. Another layer to obscure the link between the crypto payment and actual cash in his hand. He apparently said later if he just ditched that second phone when he sensed heat, police would have had a hell of a time proving it was him running the Nth Rooms.
Sounds like they were paranoid but also prepared. They had backup plans.
They knew they were playing with fire. Live with the risk. If an admin even suspected police were sniffing around, they'd just delete entire chat rooms. Poof, evidence gone. But they were confident they could get their audience back. They had hidden ways to communicate, secondary channels, probably using other obscure apps to tell people where the new room was. They knew they could regather those 250,000 followers pretty quickly.
It seems like a weird contradiction. They wanted total anonymity for themselves, but they desperately wanted their work, their horrific creation, to be seen by everyone.
That's a key part of the psychology, I think. This perverse desire for notoriety, exposure for the product, the torture itself, but total secrecy for the producer. And the combination of Telegram's encryption and untraceable crypto let them have both for a long time. Widespread infamy for the rooms, personal invisibility for them.
But this digital fortress eventually crumbled, not because the tech failed, but because of people. In 2019, right? Team Flame.
Team Flame. They're the heroes in this story, really. A small group of female journalists, amazingly included 2 university students. They saw the police were hitting a wall with the tech side.
And realized the only way in was to become part of that audience, which must have been incredibly dangerous.
Incredibly brave, required meticulous planning. They created fake male profiles, learned the language, the behavior of the watchers, managed to get inside the rooms, spent time just listening, documenting, talking to victims when possible, even some low-level admins, painstakingly gathering evidence, screenshots, chat logs, whatever they could get.
And instead of just handing it to the police, they went public.
They took all that evidence and gave it straight to major news outlets in South Korea, broadcasting the full, sickening reality of it. That public exposure forced everyone's hand. Government, police. They had to act decisively then. The pressure generated by Team Flame's work was crucial for the final crackdown.
So that pressure finally broke through the digital shield. How did the police eventually trace the untraceable crypto back to the doctor, Cho Jubin?
That's where the real world meets the digital. Bitcoin itself might be pseudonymous, but you usually have to convert it to real money eventually, right? The exchange point. Investigators focused on the crypto exchange centers Cho Jubin used to cash out his profits into Korean won. Regulations in South Korea, like KYC Know Your Customer rules, meant that even if you used different wallets, the exchange itself likely required verified ID for large cash outs. They tracked the huge volume of crypto moving, cross-referenced it with the exchange's records, and eventually linked those massive cash outs back to his specific verified identity.
So the bottleneck wasn't Telegram's encryption, it was turning the crypto into spendable cash under local banking rules.
That was the weak link, monetizing the crime in the real world. That's how they got Cho Jubin.
When this news finally exploded into the public consciousness, especially that number, 250,000 subscribers funding sexual torture, it sounds like it caused a kind of national breakdown in South Korea. Let's talk about that public reaction, the outrage, and this horrifying 1 in 100 statistic.
The shock wasn't just the crime itself, horrific as it was. It was the scale of complicity. Realizing 250,000 people were watching, that quickly got translated into this statistic. Mathematically, roughly 1 in every 100 people in the country was somehow involved in viewing this stuff. That idea that it could be your colleague, your neighbor, someone in your family, it absolutely shattered public trust. A profound sense of societal contamination.
And the public demanded more than just catching the ringleaders, didn't they? They wanted everyone involved held accountable.
The outrage was massive, led to huge public action. Millions signed petitions, one of the biggest petition drives ever there, demanding the government release the names, the identities of all 250,000 people who paid, viewed, shared these videos. The feeling was clear. If you funded torture, you shouldn't get to hide. Your name should be public.
Okay, let's follow the arrest that came from all this pressure. Cho Jubin, the doctor, was caught first.
March 2020. After they traced his crypto dealings, and after they caught him, they did that public perp walk thing. His statement then, it became infamous, caused huge revulsion.
Right, he said something like, "Thank you for stopping the life of a demon that I couldn't control." Why did that land so badly?
Because it sounded utterly devoid of remorse. No guilt, no empathy for the victims, nothing. People widely interpreted it as a boast, like he was impressed with himself, with how demonic he'd become, thanking them for stopping him only because he'd reached some legendary level of evil he couldn't handle. It just reinforced that image of him seeing his crimes as some kind of grand, dark achievement.
Chilling. And then about 7 months later, they got God, Moon Hung-wook. It's easy to forget how young these guys were running these massive operations.
That's another shocking part. Cho Jubin, the doctor, only 24 when arrested. Moon Hung-wook, God, just 23. Barely adults running this empire of digital torture. Altogether, police arrested about 17 people connected to running the rooms, including those minor admins they'd recruited.
And the sentences. After everything, did the courts reflect the scale of the horror?
They aimed for significant sentences, reflecting the unprecedented nature of the crimes. Cho Jubin got 42 years in prison, sentenced in October 2020. Moon Hung-wook got 34 years, April 2022. These are long sentences for digital sex crimes in South Korea, some of the longest.
Right.
But for many victims, for the public, does it feel like enough? Given the thousands of lives shattered, probably not. It feels insufficient weight against that level of damage.
And that's the real tragedy, isn't it? The lasting scars, the damage the legal system just can't fix. What's happened to the victims long term?
Even with counseling, support, the psychological damage is just devastating. Irreversible, often. Victims report intense PTSD years later, debilitating anxiety, depression, often compounded by this constant fear of being recognized, of the videos resurfacing. Many had to quit jobs, leave school, end relationships. Some families broke apart under the shame, the pressure, just constant fear.
It really does feel like more than just a crime case. It's seen as a permanent stain on South Korean society now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It exposed this huge, dark undercurrent, revealed this disturbing, undeniable demand for inhumane content, people actively seeking it out, paying for it, just beneath the surface of everyday life, a really uncomfortable truth to confront.
And what's truly sobering is that even years later, after these big arrests, the problem hasn't gone away. Digital sex crimes are still a major issue.
The underlying problem persists, yeah. It's still widespread in South Korea. Official stats show thousands of cases filed every year, over 6,000, but the conviction rate, alarmingly low, only about 10%. So for the Nth Room victims, that fear is permanent. Knowing those videos are out there, potentially accessible by 250,000 people, digital content never really dies. That possibility of re-exposure years down the line, it's its own kind of ongoing psychological torture. Pulling it all together, the Nth Room case is it's one of the starkest examples we have of how powerful tech, like encryption, can be turned into a weapon. It enabled this extreme objectification, this control, this torture, often without the perpetrator ever needing to be physically present. It really showed a new, terrifying frontier for organized digital crime.
And it really makes you question the sentences for the guys who ran it, Doctor and God. 42 years, 34 years. Sounds like a long time, but measured against destroying thousands of lives, can it ever feel like enough?
And we have to come back to it. The real, unanswered ethical question hangs over those 250,000 viewers. They paid, they demanded, they fueled it. They were the engine. Their mass complicity is maybe the most disturbing, unresolved part of this whole nightmare.
So what does this all mean? We had creators driven by this twisted need for their horrific work to be seen globally while they hid. What is it in someone that drives them to commit such systematic, life-destroying crimes just for control, for money, for that sick feeling of power? This case is just such a brutal warning about how digital anonymity can let the absolute worst parts of human nature run wild and scale up massively. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How well do we really know what people around us are thinking, doing when they're alone online, shielded by that digital curtain? The need for constant awareness, vigilance. It's not just advice anymore. It feels like a basic requirement for navigating the world today.
Stay safe out there, and stay aware of what anonymity can enable.